Republicans are going back to the drawing board after Democrats voted to give money to education institutions that partner with the Chinese Communist Party. After a 13-hour-long hearing, they struck down an amendment that would have prevented these schools from getting federal relief funding. NTD's Christina Kim has those details.
In a party-line vote, the Democrat-controlled Education and Labor Committee tossed Representative Elise Stefanik's amendment to Biden's pandemic relief bill. It would have denied schools federal money if they were tied to Chinese entities and communist affiliates. This essentially means that schools will still be given taxpayer money even if they partner with the Chinese Communist Party or CCP. This comes after Biden quietly nixed Trump's policy that would have required colleges to disclose ties to Confucius institutes, CCP-funded school partnerships considered to be a part of Beijing's arm to promote communist propaganda. China analyst Gordon Chang says the U.S. is being overwhelmed.
I think hundreds of thousands of collectors of information that China has in our country. It's not just their Ministry of State Security agents. It's their tourists. It's their business people. It's their students who are interviewed when they go back to China. They collect information, 1,000 grains of sand approach.
Introducing the measure to the committee, Republican Representative Stefanik said, quote, "The Chinese Communist Party will do everything possible to steal our intellectual property and research, compromise our professors, and even recruit individuals on campus for espionage." In addition to this measure, Democrats and the Biden administration have indicated they want to cooperate with China on certain issues like climate change and the pandemic. Chang says this strategy won't work.
How can we cooperate with a government that means to overthrow us? It just doesn't seem to make sense. And the Communist Party has been very clear. They say that if you don't cooperate with us on everything, we're not going to cooperate on anything.
Chang lays out the strategy he believes the U.S. should take.
And I think the way that we should be approaching this is to cut all ties with China, because China uses every point of contact with the United States to undermine our society, overthrow our government.
Stefanik said higher education is valued for open thought and expression and being a place for innovation and learning. But the Chinese Communist Party sees these institutions as, quote, forums for communist brainwashing and censoring speech, and unfortunately, a marketplace for intellectual theft. She says Democrats are putting China first and America last. Christina Kim, NTD News.
President Biden speaks with Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping for the first time. We take a look at what Biden did in his first 3 weeks to impact China policy.
Experts have been saying President Biden will continue Trump's tough stance on China.
We do think that Joe Biden and his administration will continue a tougher approach to China than.
But one analyst says, judging from recent China policies, the new administration's specific methods are quite different. Biden has taken a hard line towards China's military activities in the South China Sea. That's through sending aircraft carriers and warships to sail through the ocean, sending the message to China that the U.S. does not recognize Beijing's claim to the territory. But on the other hand, the White House recently withdrew a Trump-era rule that require American schools to report their relationships with China's Confucius institutes. Those are language and cultural classes held outside of China, sponsored by the Chinese regime. They've been accused of spreading pro-CCP propaganda and exporting censorship to U.S. campuses. The new administration also backed off from Trump's efforts to ban TikTok. The social media app is hugely popular among American teenagers, but is owned by a Chinese company. Lawmakers and experts have said the firm may collect sensitive data from American users and submit it to the CCP. President Biden also extended the deadline for American investors to stop buying stakes in Chinese companies with military ties. Former President Trump previously set the deadline for last month.
Biden's strategy, as we have seen in the 3 weeks since he took office, is to deal with the hard power of the Chinese regime and the sharp power of the regime separately.
These terms were coined by American diplomats. Hard power refers to military force and coercion. Soft power means using culture, ideals, and values to influence others. China affairs analyst Tang Jingyuan says the Chinese regime's sharp power is different from both of the above.
It is actually a comprehensive use of information warfare, public opinion warfare. It's to infiltrate the other side's economic, political, cultural, and scientific fields. The goal is to gain control over the fields and then influence the other country's policies or even achieve complete control.
He believes China actually relies more on Confucius Institute's TikTok and American investment to advance its conflict with the U.S. than through military means.
Those are the areas where they can gain practical benefits, because we know that the risk of a direct military conflict between the United States and China is extremely low. So the U.S. and China sending warships, etc., are more of a political declaration.
He said the previous administration has been trying to decouple with China in a number of fields, including the development of sensitive technology.
As long as you are connected in these areas, you can hardly avoid the CCP's use of various ways to take advantage of the openness of Western liberal and democratic societies to infiltrate and dismantle you from within. So decoupling in these areas, in my opinion, is the most effective way.
But it remains to be seen whether it's likely to happen. A senior China policy official from the Biden administration said in a panel discussion that the U.S. and China should take small steps to form a workable relationship.
For both sides to stop, take a deep breath, perhaps step back a little bit, reflect, but there may be things on visas, on journalists, on consular outposts. There are a number of things that you could imagine that could be potentially helpful.
He could be referring to reversing some of Trump's policies. The policies include restricting visas for Chinese Communist Party members, expelling Chinese state media journalists, and closing Chinese consulate that allegedly served as spy outposts. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
And Texas is pushing back against NBA Mavericks owner Mark Cuban, who ordered the team to stop playing the national anthem before games. The Star-Spangled Banner Protection Act would require the national anthem to be played at all events that receive public funding. Even though the NBA reinstated the anthem, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said Cuban's actions made it clear they must specify that in Texas we play the national anthem before all major events. He says in a time where, quote, so many things divide us, sports are one thing that bring us together. Right, left, black, white, and brown. Experts and concerned commentators allege that China's regime is killing our kids with fentanyl, burning our cities through front groups, stealing our technology, and manipulating our elections. We spoke with author and commentator Trevor Loudon on what he's calling China's war on Americans. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the story.
An expert on communist groups alleges China influenced the election to favor Joe Biden. Trevor Loudon traces the group called Seed the Vote back to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. Seed the Vote worked to help oust Trump by organizing people of the working class and communities of color. Loudon says they claim they won 6 out of the 7 states they targeted for Joe Biden. Loudon also brings up the group New Virginia Majority. According to Influence Watch, the group has ties to radical revolutionary left organizations and people. Loudon alleges they use geographic information system mapping to send specific volunteers into targeted households, like by sending Ethiopians into Ethiopian households.
Now, those maps were generated by a Liberation Road communist, a man called Steve McClure, a graduate of the Geography Department of George Mason University. But guess where he's been working for the last 10 years to generate those maps? He's been working in the Wuhan University, China Geography Department. They are using Chinese computers and Chinese money and Chinese staff to flip districts in Virginia and across the South.
Black Lives Matter was formed by 3 women. Loudon alleges they are affiliated with Liberation Road, which he says is a pro-Chinese communist organization. Loudon outlines their connection to the vice president.
Alicia Garza, the main founder, is a very close friend of Kamala Harris and a young woman called Latifah Simon. They're sort of, the 3 of them are very close. Kamala Harris is a Black Lives Matter candidate, and her whole background is involved with pro-Chinese radical activists.
Now let's consider Texit, the concept of Texas leaving the Union and becoming its own nation. Loudon says China and Russia want the U.S. to split up. That way they can pick us off more easily, he says. He's calling on Texas to act independently and not secede unless it's absolutely necessary.
I support the sentiment behind it. Maybe one day it'll become necessary, but if we stand together, maybe we can restore the republic without going that far. Because Like Alan West says, don't secede, lead. I want Texas to lead the salvation of this whole republic. That's what I really want to see.
The Texit bill the state representative put forward is not about Texas leaving the Union. It's about having a discussion about Texas seceding. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And if you can take your eyes off the soaring stock market for a moment, you'll see that businesses are still really struggling, even the big ones. One of America's biggest publishers, Condé Nast, is withholding millions of dollars of rent from the One World Trade Center. It wants a rent reduction. NTD's Tom Ojimak has the details.
The Wall Street Journal reports that publisher Condé Nast is withholding $2.4 million in rent at the One World Trade Center. Condé Nast publishes titles like GQ, Vogue, Wired, and The New Yorker. It's struggling with falling revenue amid the pandemic and skipped its January rent payment. The company reportedly wants to cut its square footage and reduce rent per square foot. A spokesman told the Wall Street Journal that the company is in discussions with the co-owners of One World Trade Center about resolving the rent dispute. The publisher wants its lease to be brought into line with current market conditions. The Port Authority, which co-owns One World Trade Center, said it plans to enforce full payment. New York City's commercial real estate market faces mounting pressure. The city was one of the hardest hit by the outbreak, with shutdowns emptying offices and restaurants and closing theaters and shops. Last year, a Wells Fargo report found that property values of over 100 struggling New York buildings fell by an average of 27%. A recent bond document filing says Condé Nast could withhold more money in coming months. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
Hi there. A quick update. Social media has some new restrictions which might affect your access to our channel. If you want to stay tuned, make sure you visit us directly at ntd.com. We'll also have a newsletter coming out soon, and you can sign up for that now, so stay in touch. Thanks for watching.